And we are back. Welcome to my mid-season Premier League table review, where we take a look back at the prediction that I made at the start of this season for the Premier League season and see where we are at the halfway stage. By now, every single Premier League team has played at least 19 of the 38 games that they are supposed to play. And with the exception of Manchester City and Brentford and kind of Luton and Bournemouth, every single team has played against every single other team. So we now have the opportunity to review the season at the halfway mark, see how I have got on in terms of placing the teams against one another, and then we assign ourselves a score based on the difference between where I predicted and where the teams actually are. And then what we can do is we can compare it to the other season's predictions that we have done over the last couple of years. If you are new to this sort of thing, please check out my actual predictions and my results from the last couple of years. Those videos will be available for you here and now. And if you haven't done so already, please do consider dropping a like on this video as well and subscribing to the channel. We have a whole host of football content for you on this channel. So if this is the first time you're here, please do consider subscribing as well. Let's start off right at the bottom of the league, where you will currently find Sheffield United, which is exactly where I predicted them to finish, which means that I get a score of 0. And that is going to be it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
That's all, folks.
Now, obviously, we are going to have to address all of the other predictions that I made, and I will say this at the top of the video now. Sheffield United in 20th is the only prediction that I currently have absolutely spot on. But to be fair, there are some relatively good ones, but as you can imagine, there are some relatively shocking ones as well. It does look like, though, as we move into this January transfer window, that Sheffield United have agreed a deal to sign Ben Brereton Diaz, the former Blackburn player, who is a very good sort of winger forward, might be the sort of player that they've been missing and could help them in their bid for survival. But for me, I stand by that prediction. Sheffield United in 20th, I would still expect them to go down. In 19th, we currently find Burnley, which I predicted to stay up. I had them 15th, so that is a point score of 4 for Burnley, as that is 4 positions out from where I initially predicted them to finish. My only sort of surprise with Burnley is I really thought that they would have adapted. By now, they seem to still be, I want to say, arrogant enough to think that Vincent Kompany believes he can still play this possession style of attacking football that he was obviously trained to use by the likes of Pep Guardiola at Manchester City, and it worked for them in the Championship, and he's trying to apply it to his Burnley team in the Premier League. But it's a little bit Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Cardiff, if you ask me, trying to play the Manchester United style of way in a side that just, quite frankly, isn't good enough to play that style of football at this level. And I think that's why Burnley find themselves in 19th, because they're just getting out-footballed by the other sides around them. And unfortunately, unless they do address that, I think you will find Burnley getting themselves relegated at the end of the season. In 18th place, it is currently Luton Town. Now, I have put a little asterisk next to them because they do have a game in hand. And if they were to win that game in hand, they would actually jump out of the relegation zone. That game at hand, of course, is against Bournemouth, which will be the replayed game where, of course, Tom Lockyer had that cardiac arrest and the game had to be abandoned, so it will be replayed at some point. I also did predict Luton to stay up as a partial Luton Town fan. You can see it in the background behind you. It was more out of belief than an actual genuine prediction. It was a little bit of bias, but a little bit of hope and actual thought that they could do it. So I'm not too complaining at the moment about the fact that I did Luton 16th and they're currently 18th. My only concern is when we look at the next few teams that are coming up, they've sort of had a real positive trend over the last couple of weeks, whereas Luton are still struggling. Yes, they've had 2 wins in their last 3, but I think we can all agree that they were pretty well beaten by Chelsea. It just took a late comeback where they could have pulled it level, but it was all a little bit too late. So we'll see with Luton Town. I think they probably do need to do some business in January. I think they're in desperate need of a striker, but as we know with Luton, they don't really have the funds to do that. But I think Roy Edwards is doing a good job. I hope, for the sake of my family, that Luton Town do stay up, but we'll see. I'm still positive in belief, negative in actual realistic expectation, but we shall see. In 17th place at the moment is Everton, which I have a double asterisk on because obviously, as we know, Everton have had a 10-point deduction. That means that my prediction of 12th means that I'm going to have to score 5 points for them. The real frustration is the fact that if Everton had those 10 points added on, they would be 12th, which is obviously exactly where I predicted them to be. So I can't complain about things in that regard. But unfortunately, going into the season, we did know that Everton had these charges hanging over them. We know that there are still more charges potentially labelled at them, as well as Nottingham Forest potentially having charges labelled at them at the moment. And of course, all the ones with Manchester City and Chelsea. So we knew going into this season that there was a possibility that those clubs could receive points deductions. So I had to bear that in mind when I did my Premier League predictions. So that is why I'm still going to count Everton as 17th and still give myself 5 points for the difference, because that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, Everton are now in 17th due to that 10-point deduction. We'll see what happens at the end of the season, whether or not they get those 10 points revoked or potentially have even more added on. In 16th, it is Brentford, another 5-point score for me. They've not done as well as I expected them to. Yes, they do have a game in hand, but that game in hand would only see them, I think, go up 1, potentially even 2 places. And that game in hand is against Manchester City. So unrealistic that they'll actually get a result in that game. Yes, we all knew they were going to struggle without Ivan Toney. Yes, Brian Mbeumo has picked up an injury over the last couple of months, has not been available, and it's not going to get much better for them, because even though Toney is going to be back from his suspension, he could potentially be going to another club in the Premier League. Like I say, Mbeumo is still injured. Wissa, Onyeka, and a couple of others have gone to the African Cup of Nations. So it's going to be a really, really tough January for Brentford. And if they don't get it right, and the likes of Luton, Burnley and Sheffield start picking up points, they could very easily be dragged into that relegation zone. In 15th, it is Nottingham Forest. And rather frustratingly, if I'd have done this video a couple of weeks ago, I think I would have been bang on with Nottingham Forest in 17th. However, unfortunately, they then went and won away at Newcastle and beat Manchester United at home, which now means that Forest are 15th. Fair play to them. They got rid of their manager, brought in Nuno. He's made a positive start, as you would expect from any new manager. But as always with Nottingham Forest, you just don't really know what's going to happen in the January transfer window. They could potentially make another 10 signings and sell another 10 players. We do know that those decisions are completely out of the manager's hands, and that's why Steve Cooper has struggled so much, because he's basically playing with players he didn't even necessarily want or sign. And we'll just have to see. But 2 positive results for Nuno have built a platform for Forest to build themselves back up the table. We'll see what happens with them. For me, though, I still think they're going to end up struggling come at the end of the season. In 14th, we have Crystal Palace. I predicted them to finish 13th. No real complaints from me in that regard. They're just having the sort of season I would have expected. They've had a pretty poor run of form recently, but they always do. I just think Crystal Palace are that side that finish mid-table, but are always just about safe from relegation. I don't see that changing anytime soon. And like I say, very happy with my prediction for Crystal Palace. Equally, with my prediction in 13th, which is Fulham, who I predicted to finish 14th. So at the moment, Palace and Fulham are just the other way round. It is what it is. Again, no real complaints from me. They're performing about as well as I would have expected. Picking up good results at home, struggling away from home. They're a good team. They're not a great team. They are very much like Crystal Palace, just your bog standard mid-table Premier League team. One side that has massively surprised me, though, is the team that is in 12th, and that is Bournemouth. Now, when I did my prediction at the start of the season, Gary O'Neill had just been relieved of his position, which I thought was a horrendous decision. Iraola was brought in. I thought his style of management, very similar to Vincent Kompany at Burnley. I didn't think it would suit the way that Bournemouth play. But Iraola has actually adapted. He's been a little bit more conservative. Yes, he still wants to play possession. He still wants to play progressive. But he has adapted his style of play to Bournemouth as Bournemouth have adapted their style of play to him. And they've got a much better balance in their side right now. They've got a goal scorer in Dominic Solanke, who is absolutely playing at the top of his game right now. We'll be very interested to see if big clubs come in for him in January. I've seen several reports that whichever club doesn't sign Ivan Toney, be that Arsenal, Chelsea, potentially even Man United, they reckon that whoever doesn't get Ivan Toney will then switch attentions to Dominic Solanke. So huge pressure on Bournemouth to keep a hold of him. They can charge an absolute fortune for him the way that he is playing at the moment. So I think as long as he stays fit, Bournemouth will be more than okay. And also, they still have that game in hand against Luton as well, which could see them rise even further up the table. Great job that Iraola is doing at Bournemouth right now. Fair play to him. However, he is still not doing as good a job as the man who replaced him, or the man he replaced, should I say, and that is Gary O'Neill at Wolves. And again, I have to stress the point that when I recorded my predictions at the start of the season, Julian Lopetegui was still in charge, and the rumours were literally swirling around that morning I recorded that video that he was about to leave, which would have left Wolves managerless. Pedro Neto still wasn't going to be fit for the start of the season. They hadn't made any signings so far in the window. So for Gary O'Neill to come in, make the signings that he did, get Neto fit for the start of the season, albeit he's been injured for the last couple of months, but they've not exactly missed him that much. He's done a fantastic job at Wolves, and I genuinely believe, and obviously you never know what's going to happen in football, but I genuinely believe that if I'd have known Gary O'Neill was going to take over at Wolves when I recorded my video at the start of the year, I probably would have put Wolves above at least Forest, Luton and Burnley. Maybe not any higher than that, but I know how good Gary O'Neill is at this sort of level. He's got the right team around him, and he's made a very, very good squad of Wolves so far this year. And best of luck to them for the rest of the season. I think they're doing very, very well. In 10th place, we have another new Premier League manager, and that is Mauricio Pochettino, who is doing okay at Chelsea. I don't think he's doing awful. I think he could do better, but you've got to look at the squad that he's got available to him. They've got an average age of like 24. I think Cole Palmer has been an absolute revelation. It's just, they've had a lot of injuries. People don't tend to talk about it with Chelsea because they just label the 1 billion squad, 100 million on Mudryk, 100 million on Caicedo, 100 million on Enzo Fernandez, and just sort of go, well, shouldn't they be in the top 4? But let's be real. Reece James has missed the entire season. Ben Chilwell has missed the entire season. Over the last 3 years, those have been Chelsea's two most important players. And if they were fit, they would be playing every week. And if they were playing every week, Chelsea would be higher than 10th. So again, you can't foresee these things happening in football. Injuries do happen. I think Chelsea are in a good spot right now. Yes, they would like to be higher up the table, but I don't think any Chelsea fan can realistically be too disappointed with 10th place at the moment, with the amount of disarray that's sort of gone on in and around the squad over the last few months. Pochettino, is he the right man for the job? I'm sure that'll be assessed come the end of the season, but for now, I think Chelsea in 10th is about right. Speaking of injury crisis, in 9th place, it is Newcastle, who I predicted to finish 7th. Again, I'm not going to complain too much about that, considering I didn't think Newcastle would do as well this season. Obviously, I could never have foreseen the amount of injuries they were going to get, and I think that's probably why they are 9th rather than a little bit further up the table. But like I say, I don't think 7th was a bad prediction, and I stand by it. I can't really see Newcastle realistically getting higher than 7th for the rest of the season. Yes, there are a couple of teams that could drop down, but it's really tight in and around this part of the table right now, and anyone could get those last Europa League, Europa Conference, maybe even sneak into a 5th place Champions League spot, depending on how well Man City and Arsenal do for the remainder of the season. But all in all, I think Newcastle are where they should be, and like I say, I don't think the prediction has gone too badly there. Next up, in 8th place, I may have done Manchester United to win the league this year.
Are you serious?
But the thing is, again, this was a purely biased prediction, and I did say that at the start of the season when I recorded my initial video. But as a Manchester United fan, I went into this season off the back of what was a very good season last season, full of optimism, with a squad that seemed to finally be gelling, finally getting things together, make a couple of decent signings, sort out the striker position, and off we go. And it fell apart so quickly again. And Rashford's form's fallen out the window. All this nonsense with Sancho. Højlund couldn't score a goal, but quite frankly, he's not been getting any service. Anthony, Maguire, all this hoo-ah, all the drama on and off the pitch. It doesn't surprise me to see Manchester United the way they are. I can still sit here and be disappointed. I've spoken about it enough times in my Manchester United reaction videos. I accept that this is as good as we are in regards to the fact that I can't expect more from the current squad that we have. However, I think it is unacceptable that this is the sort of squad that we have. And I hope that sort of makes sense. It's unacceptable even though I accept it, because I accept this is as good as we are, even though it's unacceptable because we should be better, but this is as good as we are, so I can't expect any more from where we actually are. That's the best way I can describe it. Manchester United are 8th. I didn't finish first. Just whack those 7 points on me. And unfortunately, I'll have to take the L on this one. Speaking of 7, in 7th place, we have Brighton, who I did predict to finish 9th. And to be honest, when I put this together this morning, I didn't realise how far up the table Brighton were, because I think if we're being honest, Brighton have probably underperformed this season. I think the results they've been getting have not really been the sort of results you would be expecting from them. They've drawn a lot of games they probably could have won. They've certainly lost a few games as well. And when I saw them, they were in 7th, I was like, all right, fair play to them. And again, you have to give credit to Roberto De Zerbi. There's a lot of people saying that he's going to replace Pep Guardiola at Man City at the end of the season. And if he does, the best of luck to him. I say as a Manchester United fan. But again, you just have to give credit to him and the young squad of players that he's got in and around that squad, because quite clearly they're still producing the results that I hadn't even noticed that they were still getting. Fair play to Brighton. They're in 7th place. Well deserved. Still in Europe. Still in a European place for next season. And we'll see how the rest of the season holds. But like I say, I think United, Newcastle, Chelsea, maybe even Wolves as well, could definitely push them for those spots over the next couple of months. In 6th place, another team that is arguably massively overperforming in West Ham. But again, I can't complain about my prediction because I put them to finish 10th. I expected them to be the best of the rest. I thought losing Declan Rice and the extra strain of Europe for a second season running would weigh them down enough that they wouldn't be then competing for the European places again. But fair play to them. They're playing some absolutely phenomenal stuff. I would argue that West Ham United had the best summer transfer window. And you can quote that down in the comments section if you think anyone had a better summer transfer window than West Ham. But James Ward-Prowse, Kudus, a couple of more defenders in. I think they've done some really good business in the key areas. And yes, they haven't got the striker situation sorted, but Bowen's been absolutely on fire up there. Like I say, Kudus, Ward-Prowse, Paqueta, being able to mix in the likes of Ben Rama. Souček's been doing well. I just think they've got a really solid unit. Alvarez, I knew I'd forgotten one of them. Alvarez in midfield, a great addition for them, and considering that they just lost Declan Rice. And who knows? West Ham could keep going, push for a Champions League spot. Why not? They're playing some very good stuff right now. We'll see what happens once the European football comes back for them. We'll see how they cope in January with the loss of a lot of African players to the African Cup of Nations. But I think they'll do all right. I think they do need a couple more signings. But like I say, if they keep up the way that they've done so far this season, I think they'll definitely be in and around those European places come the end of the season. Arguably, the only club that you could say possibly had an even better transfer window than West Ham is, of course, Tottenham, who are in 5th. 3 places above where I initially predicted them to go. It was always going to be a toss-up about how good Ange Postecoglou was going to be as a manager, how good were Tottenham going to be without Harry Kane, and they've delivered so far. And I think when they get James Maddison back fit again, and when they get the likes of Van de Ven and Romero fit again, I think that's the only reason they've dropped off from where they were. They lost key players, and like I say, those key players, Maddison, Van de Ven, obviously they've got Vicario in goal. Again, you can definitely make a strong argument that they also had the best window in the summer. But we'll see again. You never know with Tottenham. They are the side that, it is a stereotype. They're always 1 or 2 games away from bottling it and completely falling apart. But they believe in Ange. The players believe in Ange. The fans believe in Ange. And the style of football is a very good thing to watch. And like I say, they've got their players coming back to full fitness soon. Yes, again, they're going to lose Son to the Asia Games for a month as well. So will they be able to cope without him? We shall see. Lots of pressure on them, but they don't have any other commitments. They're not in Europe, so they can just keep focusing week to week, and we'll see what happens. Could it be a top 4 finish for Tottenham Hotspur? In 4th place, we find ourselves with Arsenal, who were top at Christmas Day and now find themselves 4th as we go into the new year, because that's just how tight it is at the top at the moment. I predicted Arsenal to finish 3rd, so it's only 1 point for me. Don't really have too much to say for them. They definitely look a better side with Declan Rice in the team. Up front, they're still struggling. Is it going to be Ivan Toney? Is it going to be Dominic Solanke? I think you'll probably find they sign one of them in this January transfer window. And will that be the difference that they need to push themselves all the way to the top of the table come the end of the season? Personally, I don't think so, but we shall see. The team that I think will probably end up eventually winning the title come the end of the season is the team currently in 3rd place, which is, of course, Manchester City, with a little asterisk on them as well, because they still have that game against Brentford, which I think we all expect them to win, although they did lose it last year. So you just never know. The Premier League always throws up some dodgy ones. But because I predicted them to finish 2nd, hilariously, it's only a 1 point for me. But again, De Bruyne back this week, Haaland back next week. No players going to the African Cup of Nations. No players going to the Asia Cup. Something that can't be said for any of the other clubs competing for the title this season. The real opportunity for Manchester City to stamp their authority on the Premier League this month. I don't think anyone will be surprised to see them top the table come the end of January. A side that would surprise everyone to top the table at the end of January is the team in second place, which is Aston Villa. But again, I can't complain about my prediction because I said they finished fifth. And I really, really, really wanted to put them in the top four. But I don't think they're as good as Arsenal, Man City and Liverpool. And I'm a Man United fan, so I was always going to put Man United above them as well. So great job that Unai Emery's doing. Question marks about how well they do if they lost Ollie Watkins. But again, a really good summer transfer window for them as well. Likes of Pau Torres coming in, keeping a hold of Douglas Luiz, which looks like it's going to be another massive job for them in January, given the fact that Arsenal are massively sniffing around Douglas Luiz. But they've got no reason to sell. So Arsenal are going to have to cough up some serious money, both to the club and the player, to get Douglas Luiz out of Aston Villa. And for their sake, I hope they do get into the Champions League. They thoroughly deserve it. They're sort of doing what Newcastle did last season in terms of that side that no one really expected to be there yet, but are really, really pushing all the way. And like I say, depending on how well Arsenal and Manchester City do for the rest of the season, there may be a fifth spot for the Champions League come the summer anyway. And obviously that's where I predicted Villa to finish. I think they will finish in the top 5 this season. So best of luck to them. And then unfortunately, in first place, it's Liverpool. But I don't think they're going to stay there. I think they're having a very good season. I do think they're slightly overachieving. I think the signing of Szoboszlai has been a massive, massive one for them. I think a return of form to Van Dijk has been massive for them. How are they going to cope without Mo Salah for the next month? We shall see. I don't think losing Endo to the Asia Games is going to be as significant a loss, but he is their best holding midfielder, so they're going to have to sort that out as well. Are they going to fall off this month? I don't think they've got too many difficult games this month. I think that's really the key for them, but they're going to be in and around that title fight. I just don't think anyone's going to stop Man City. And that brings us to the end of the video. All that is left to do now is tally up the points over the course of this first half of the season and see how I have done. Now, over the last 2 years, these are the scores that I got. 70 points for the 21-22 season, 85 points for the 22-23 season. But as things stand at the halfway mark, even with that Everton change, I am on 64 points, which means this is my best season so far. And to be honest, I'm pretty confident it's going to get even better because the current form set that these sides are in, I think we are going to see that a little shift towards what I have gone for over the course of the whole season. So let me know how you guys have got on if you did play along at home as well. 64 is my current score. Let me know your score down in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to end up winning the Premier League this season? Who's going to finish in those top 4 places? And who is going to be relegated down to the Championship? Thank you very much for watching once again. I'll be back tomorrow morning with my next set of FA Cup third round predictions. I will see you then.